I was asked by a couple different chat viewers about Aphotic and how come it seems like Aphotic is altering the outcome of cooldown reduction on their builds, most notably with Reaper skeletons. It turns out that the creator Nick2 had put out a video recently where they kind of just like tossed this in there very quickly, this idea of an anecdotal 30% increase in effectiveness of cooldown reduction, very specifically when using Aphotic. So, because it was something that was interesting on the Necromancer to go test, we sat down and we tested it. And initially, my findings were, no, it didn't impact it in any way, shape, or form. And that was mostly due to the fact that there were kind of too many variables. Most notably, when we're talking about something like the Reaper skeletons, one, we already have a bug, and I realize I'm in the way, so let me get out of the way here. But one, we already have a bug with the Reaper skeletons, which is if you choose the ability to reduce cooldown, every 10 seconds they will do their windup attack, and they will reduce one of your cooldowns by 3 seconds. If you choose the ability to generate corpses, every 10 seconds when they do their windup, they will still reduce a random cooldown on your skill bar. But running the test just a couple times to see if I noticed anything particularly weird about how the Reaper skeletons worked, I didn't really notice a reduction in cooldown. I was using Blood Wave, so I can just like very quickly kind of highlight what we were doing, make a bunch of Reapers, use Blood Wave, cast Decrepify, do this, have Empowering up, and you'll notice like big chunks of cooldown reduction will come out, but also they naturally do this type of function. So at first I was really just willing to say, no, Aphotic doesn't do anything. And that's when I realized that even this was too many variables. You'll notice that my Reaper skeletons are doing a staggered application of their attacks here. How quickly you start your testing determines where in the 10-second cycle you are between when they'll use their next Reap attack. And then on top of that, your skeletons already, like even if I just do this, if you apply Decrepify to a target, both your defenders and your Reapers, I've never seen this actually work with skirmishers, but your defenders and your Reapers can already proc Decrepify and cooldown reduction based off of a bugged interaction that they have with lucky hit chance, very specifically for Abhorrent Decrepify. So obviously, this is just going to be hard to test regardless of the fact, because they already trigger this. But the idea is, how many times do you have to run a test before you can see that, yes, definitively, when using Aphotic, meaning that once I have all my skeletons up, empowering them will make them do shadow damage and have a 20% chance of applying a stun. And I think that that's the key to our puzzle here. But let me just go ahead and show you the test in real time, and you can go reproduce this yourself as well in case you're interested in doing it. Here's what you want to go do. You want to use defenders. I have not retested them with the ability to apply taunt. That might even further trigger things like this. I might cover that in a future video, but just pick skeleton defenders, reduce damage by 99%. What this basically means is that your defenders don't have anything particularly special about them, and then you're going to run a very simple test. You are going to cast a skill with a long cooldown. I'm going to use Blood Wave, I'm going to start a timer, and I'm just going to apply Decrepify here. And over this 50-second cooldown, hopefully a little bit sooner with Decrepify procs, we'll get a pretty good baseline of just how often they are normally triggering Abhorrent Decrepify. I also have a bunch of lucky hit chance on my gear, so on my chest, on my helmet, as well as on my amulet. And we are just going to run this test over an amount of time and see what the outcome is, and just get a baseline of how often we expect them to reduce that cooldown. We're coming down on it soon. Just need another 10-ish seconds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, over. Alrighty, so over a 50-second cooldown, it took us 45 seconds to refresh that cooldown. So that means that at least 5 times, our skeletons managed to trigger Abhorrent Decrepify's very low lucky hit chance. So if we were to go look at it, it has a 15% chance of proccing, and that is multiplied by our skeleton's base lucky hit chance, which should be nothing, plus the bonus that I have, which is about 33%. So we get like anywhere between a whopping, it can happen at all, and we don't know what that number is, to like an expected 5% chance of that triggering. But we can see that it happens at all, right? Again, it took us 45 seconds, if you look at my cursor here, for a 50-second cooldown to happen. Now, for this next set of tests, what we're going to do is we are also going to cast Raise Skeleton. Raise Skeleton will trigger Aphotic. Aphotic will cause our minions to do shadow damage and have a 20% chance of applying a stun. If you watch real close, if you cut down this video to 25% speed, and you look to see whenever the stun effect goes above the target, and whether or not the cooldown was reduced, you should see it syncing up pretty often. The only thing to keep in note here, though, is that Decrepify, the enhancement, already has a 10% chance of applying a stun. So not all of the stuns that are happening are from Aphotic, but a significantly larger amount of them are, because you have a 20% chance of it triggering as opposed to a 10% chance multiplied by their very low normal lucky hit chance, which would be a significantly lower chance of this occurring. But let's go ahead and run that exact same test. We do Blood Wave, we start our timer, we apply Decrepify, and we do Aphotic. We're going to re-trigger both Decrepify and Aphotic multiple times, like generally like every 5 seconds here, just to keep the buff up. And you'll already notice that our cooldown reduction is triggering a lot. Not only that, but the stun effect that doesn't last for very long from Aphotic is also applying to the target quite often. And here we go, 22 seconds. Easy peasy. Now, what's actually causing this to happen? Because I promise you, I could run this test multiple times. We did it here live on stream. But that is a significantly larger amount of procs of cooldown reduction from this effect. And the issue is the fact that this is a very unique effect in the game, something which modifies the behavior of our minions when we trigger a secondary skill, has a lot of layers of coding that go into this happens, right? So if I were to just look at something, I don't know, like maybe on my boots, do I have concussive strikes here? I don't. Do I have a concussive strikes here? I do already. So let's go ahead and look at concussive strikes just as an example. So concussive strikes is something that modifies our skill behavior. It adds a new lucky hit chance proc that says that we have a 20% chance to daze an enemy. That would be 20% chance multiplied by our skill coefficient multiplied by 1 plus our lucky hit chance bonus. All in all, what it turns out is that if you had like a 50% chance on your skill, you would proc this about 10% of the time. But this isn't extreme amounts of layers of coding for this, right? When a skill does damage to a target, it checks against every lucky hit chance effect that you have in the game. So Abhorrent Decrepify cooldown reduction, Abhorrent Decrepify stun, concussive strikes. You have things like X-Falls ring, etc. And it just says roll lucky hit chance on all of these, and you can trigger any one of them. And that's the end of the additional coding logic that's required for this function to be added to your character. Aphotic has to say that if you were to trigger Skeleton Priest, meaning you were to use Raise Skeleton when you are at max skeletons, change the damage type of only the skeletal warriors to a new damage type, and then add a 20% ability on their attack strikes to then trigger a stun. What I think is happening, and this is purely conjecture, just to like scratch the itch of people going, how could this possibly trigger lucky hit chance? Why would it ever work like that? I'm going to call back to certain things that we've seen in the past that have also not supposed to have been able to trigger lucky hit, but were, so that we can get a better idea of how this is happening. Way back in the day, when you would cast Bone Prison on a target with the modifier, which actually used to be Ghastly, if I'm not mistaken, or it was this one, or it was Dreadful, it was one of the two. Now it's just the enhancement that says Bone Prison applies vulnerable to targets within Bone Prison. A very long time ago, this would trigger lucky hit chance at exceptionally high rates. And why was it that it would apply lucky hit at exceptionally high rates? Well, what is the difference between Bone Prison applies vulnerable to the target for 8 seconds versus Bone Prison applies vulnerable to targets within Bone Prison? How are those two things differently? Well, if it just applies a debuff one time, the moment that I drop the Bone Prison, they continue to have vulnerable on them. That means that Bone Prison has to be able to apply this effect to a target. It has to be able to hit that target, right? It has to be able to shoot out some type of missile, which hits the target and says, you were here, get vulnerable applied. And now it has a debuff on the target. When Bone Prison previously said, targets inside of Bone Prison are vulnerable, how does it apply that throughout the time? How does it continuously check whether or not the target is within Bone Prison? Well, it shoots out infinite missiles at those targets. What it would do is it would apply an invisible missile, which would not deal damage, but would carry the vulnerable proc ability on it. and it would check over some interval, probably according to like server tick rate, which is twice per second, I would assume. But every single time that it would shoot these missiles to see if there were targets inside of it to apply vulnerable to them, it would apply a hit check. That hit check would carry a lucky hit chance of 100% coefficient. Because whenever they add a new effect to the game that does damage when it normally shouldn't, or applies an effect continuously when it shouldn't, it tends to have 100% lucky hit chance coefficient. Metamorphosis, the aspect, when you would dash through people, that had 100% lucky hit chance coefficient. But all of these things, which have a unique way of applying a hit, tend to, at first, auto check at 100% coefficient for lucky hit chance. So what I believe is happening is that Aphotic is modifying how the attacks of the skeletons are applied to targets, and it is performing another hit check with a 20% chance to apply the stun. And because it's applying another hit check, like logically, it is checking twice to see if the thing applied. That is carrying 100% lucky hit chance coefficient because it needs to for it to be able to function like a normal missile would from a different source. That's my best guess. And that's all pure conjecture. Most people could probably have skipped this part of the video, but just trying to suss out logically what might be happening. I think that's our best guess. Is this a bug? Yes, of course it's a bug. It's a bug that minions can even proc lucky hit chance in the first place. They are not meant to be able to. They do not have a lucky hit chance coefficient. They do not gain your percentage lucky hit chance, except very specifically with Decrepify. And now, very specifically with the stun portion of Aphotic on your minions' attacks, very specifically your skeletal warriors. So one, just to corroborate the purely anecdotal from Nick2's video, not anecdotal, it's just true, that just works. 2, is it a bug? Yes. 3, should you use it to get this sick cooldown reduction? I think you should. There's really no reason why, right? It's not like you're intentionally exploiting some type of bug. Our minions have been bugged for so long that at this point their bugged functionality is our expected functionality on the on their effects and what they do in the game. I just wanted to point this out there. I do think it's a pretty cool interaction, but let me know down in the comments if you found any other really cool interactions with these aspects and these effects. I'd love to hear from you. As always, if you're brand new to the channel and you like this kind of stuff, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It means the world to me. And go ahead and toss a like on the video as well if you learned something or you just found it generally entertaining. Thank you very much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps your better understanding and piloting of the various minion builds that you might be finding across the internet right now. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.